I'm Matt Booker.
I'm Dave Laird.
I'm William Beutler. You can kill me, but the legalities of eating me are quite a bit dicier.
I'm Bill Lattanzi, and the giant Sitco signs like a triangular star to steer by, here in the Great Concavity.
Yes, gentlemen, welcome to episode 36 of The Great Concavity. We are very psyched for a very special episode featuring two Bills. We're going to call one Bill and one William. This is the first time, Matt, I think we've ever had two guests on the show at the same time. So very special episode.
Yeah, I think if you don't count our conference wrap-ups.
At the same time, like ready to rock. Okay. Welcome, Bill. Welcome, William.
Thank you.
Great to have you guys on. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here.
Excellent. So, Bill Lattanzi, you've been on the show before, specifically a recent episode featuring the Wallace conference. So you got to talk to Nick Maniatis and some other of our friends down there. Very cool. You've also been at every Wallace conference I've ever been to, all four. So we're 4 for 4.
Yeah.
You've probably been to more that I haven't been to as well.
Yeah, I've been there. I like them. So Wallace has taken me around the world very, very unexpectedly. And
no kidding.
Yeah, enjoy it.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Bill, you're an academic scholar. You have done some film work related to Wallace and to Infinite Jest, and the main sort of goal topic of this show is we're going to be talking about mapping Infinite Jest, and you have some great experience with that because you do a walking tour of Boston based on the novel Infinite Jest.
Sure, I need to correct you. I play.
Sure, please
I
do.
I play an academic scholar. I make my living as a video editor, writer, and producer. I've also been a playwright, and I have done some fellowships here and there. And one of the great things about this Wallace experience is that I get to dip into one of my careers I would have liked to have had, which is as an academic scholar. So I sort of worked my way into being one in terms of Wallace. And yeah, I mean, my work with the Wallace's tour of Boston really comes out of Bill or William Beutler's work, Infinite Atlas.
Nice segue.
Sure, I would have done it without Bill.
Oh, cool.
And it started, I mean, the tour itself started when Adam Kelly was at Harvard in, I think, 2013, yeah. Bill, is that right? And he called Bill Beutler because the Atlas had gone up and said, did he want to lead a walking tour of Boston? And Bill said, well, I live in Washington and I really don't know Boston. You should call this guy Bill Lattanzi, who I've been talking to. So,
yeah.
And I did that tour. So I met with Adam. I put together a tour based on stuff that I had done because I had been kind of parallel to Bill Beutler, had been kind of obsessively crawling the streets of Boston and taking pictures of sites and thinking about Wallace's life here. And so I pretty quickly put together that tour for Adam, and we just had a fantastic time. And then things just sort of spiraled out of that. I did it again for a radio station here in Boston, and then I did it for the first Wallace conference, and then I went to Paris and did a presentation there on the Wallace tour. And,
that was great.
And then since then, I've taught Infinite Jest a couple of times at a Cambridge School of Adult Education here. I work with Chris Boucher, who teaches at BC, on his class with Infinite Jest, and just recently was down at Wallace last September. Tony McMahon asked me to bring out the greatest hits and do the Wallace tour presentation again. So I kind of tailored it for Wallace.
For Australians.
Yeah, for Australians.
For the Bogans down there.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, which was.
So it's fair to say that you like David Foster Wallace, Bill.
That's a fair thing to say. Yeah.
A little bit.
I enjoy the Wallace.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What else are we doing here?
All right. Well, that's a great intro. Excellent. And then over to William, as you mentioned, which was a great segue. William you may have known him from the Infinite Map or Infinite Atlas project. There have been quite a few times where we have posted photos on our Instagram and Twitter that feature that map. Primarily, thank Matt in the Year in Review episodes. It's kind of the view of like my record shelf, record player, and then a few pieces of art above that. And so, William, that's been featured heavily in some of the stuff we've put out before. If you've not seen this, I immediately encourage you, if you're not driving, to go check out, is it infiniteMap.com, William? Is that right?
You know what? That's the one URL that I don't have for this project. I could not get this guy to sell it to me for like any price. He wouldn't reply. In fact, the only reason the reason I began using Infinite Atlas in the first place was because I couldn't get Infinite Map. So you can go to infiniteatlas.com, and there's a little popover that'll show you the map. You can click through to see the poster. You can click through to see. And then there's infiniteboston.com as well.
Yes.
And they're all linked together.
Yeah, totally. So this map, if you've not seen it, if you don't have it, is it 2 feet by 3 feet? It's massive.
24 by 36.
24 by 36 inches, and it features a visual cartographical overview of North America with several inlays, one of Boston, one of the Great Concavity, which is featured in red, and then there's a very stylized Onan logo on the top right, which I love, and then a very extensive key at the bottom with all the locations of Infinite Jest, and my favorite of which is that Vancouver Island is featured on it with an entry. I think there's a footnote in one of the tennis kids' papers about some of the First Nations people in Vancouver Island, so that's where I'm from. And so, Matt, you own this map as well, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful map.
It's amazing.
I mean, I love maps in general, but this particular map, obviously special and near and dear to my heart. Bill also made, and see, I call him Bill. I can't say William. Sorry, I just know him as Bill. I'm going to say Beutler. Right. Maybe I'll say Beutler and Lattanzi.
Beutler's good. I respond to all of these things.
So Beutler. I've known both of these guys a while. I feel like these are my old friends, and I wish we were like hanging out in person here, because I've hung out with both of these guys multiple times in person. But Beutler also made a print of that Onan logo that you're talking about, Dave.
That's right.
Which is pretty awesome as well. And I feel, wasn't there another print? Was it just one print that you made, Beutler?
So the poster of the Infinite Map is one print. The Great Seal of Onan is its own separate print. Those are the only two posters, okay. But if you go to shop.beutlerinc.com, or if you go in through the shop on the infiniteatlas.com website, there's tote bags. There's some T-shirts as well. One of them has the Great Seal of Onan. Another has a happy face and a tennis ball that are... originally, the idea was that they were arranged to look like an infinity symbol, but it really just looks like a tennis ball next to a smiley face.
I see.
Those are for sale as well.
And stickers, the Great Seal of Onan.
And stickers. Yeah. I would say the Infinite Map is the number one seller, not even close. The stickers are probably the number two. The stickers feature the seal, and then the seal poster itself, which is a square, that's probably the third seller. I've sold like 2 tote bags.
I've got the map as well. I think I was an early purchaser of the map.
Nice.
And when I did this fellowship out at the University of Kansas that maybe we'll talk about, and it was like the single object on the wall there that I went to every day. It's kind of like Carrie in Homeland. It's not an inch of the map. Yeah, it's a great thing. It's an amazing thing that Beutler has done. It's really
it's incredible.
Between the website and all the products, it's quite something.
And why don't you go ahead, and Beutler, and just give us a background of like how the map came to be, what your idea was for it, how you researched it, kind of before it was born. How did it come to be?
Yeah,
sure thing. Well, and as we'll get to here, Matt, you played a small but significant role in shaping what it became. So, if we go back to the early years of this decade, I had just finished my second read of Infinite Jest, and this time I was even more inspired by it than when I'd read it back in college. And so by this point, I was like, all right, this is my favorite novel now. And within the same time frame, I had quit my job to go out on my own as a consultant, so I had more time to control of my own. And having previously worked at a social media agency, infographics were a big deal. And I wanted to make my own infographic, and Infinite Jest, being this ginormous book, seemed like there's a data set in here. I mean, there's many data sets in there, but I knew there had to be something interesting in Infinite Jest. So, originally this was not so focused on geography. In fact, it really wasn't focused on geography. It was going to be one thing out of many things I wanted to put on this poster. I was going to have some illustrative elements. I think that I wanted to have maybe an incandenza family tree and some wild ideas like the tennis match results. I don't even know if that's necessarily
like Jim Schultz version.
Yeah, I don't know if that's actually gettable. I don't know if it was written out that much. So
There's
at
a
this
section,
time, back in the days of GChat's ubiquity, Matt Booker was one person I was talking with about this. And you know what? In preparation for this show, I went back and actually found the chat transcript.
Oh my God.
It was in the hour of like 11 p.m. or so on October 6th of 2010 that I first told you, Matt, that I wanted to make an infographic based on Infinite Jest. You remember this conversation?
Yeah, I do. And when, in fact, when you were talking about the family tree, then that just reminds me of I had, just a couple years before that published the Greg Carlisle book, which has a family tree in it and which has a map of the tennis academy in it. So I had been pretty deep into this stuff for a few years by that point.
Yeah, you had some ideas in there, and you helped me. You're like, well, helped me realize what had already been done, including, of course, the terrific Sam Potts graphic where he maps all of the characters and how they relate. And I was very impressed by that. And I, chose not to be intimidated. I chose to see that as a challenge. Like, okay, well, there's one great data set. What's another? Mm-hmm. And so then again, credit goes back to Matt again for giving me the thread that I was able to pull in order to uncover a thing that I did not realize going into this project, which is that pretty much every single location that David Foster Wallace mentions in Infinite Jest is either a completely real place, a fictionalized version of a real place, or identified closely enough that you could drop an XY coordinate on a real map and go, this is where that thing would be. And that was a huge revelation. And so together with a friend who was a college friend of mine who had also read the novel around the same time, way back in the day in the late 90s, I enlisted him to help me out and go through the novel page by page, each of us separately, and pull out every single plausible physical location that we could find. And this was a very long process.
This was Ollie Ruff, right? Was it? Wow.
That's Ollie Ruff. That's correct.
So Ollie Ruff was actually a member of the Wallace L mailing list back in the late 90s. And so I knew his name before I knew yours. And
sure.
The fact that you two knew each other was kind of bizarre to me because I had not even made the connection anywhere but online. And I thought for a while when Ollie Ruff first joined the list, I thought that was a fake name. That's got to be a fake name. Right? But
it's a great name.
Real guy. Anyways, keep going. This is great.
Yeah, real guy. And his wife is one of the co-founders of my company. So
right.
While I was working with him on this project, I was working with her on turning my little consultancy into something a little bit bigger. So Ollie helped me with going through every single page and compiling a list of everything, including we were super scrupulous about making sure that we put all the locations in order that they were first mentioned. And that required a lot of editing over time. And then it also included a lot of time arguing about, friendly arguing, debating, well, where is this thing? Well, what do we think it is? And trying to be as, accurate as possible based on what was mentioned in the book and based on what we could tell by poring over maps. Once we had that list together, I enlisted some friends who were who work with GIS systems. So if we go back to, it was May of 2011, I think was when I had figured out where all the locations were. And at this point I had 600, different locations of which I could find, I could find XY coordinates for the great majority of them, over 500 for sure. And another friend of mine helped me plot out the locations on a school computer at the University of Oregon campus one summer, the same campus where I'd read the book years previously. A month later then, I took my I took one trip to Boston for the research aspect of this project, and I got this is before Airbnb, this is before Uber and Lyft, so I got a budget motel hotel out in Chelsea, and every morning I got a taxi that would take me to, Alston, Brighton was certainly the place where I began, and Cambridge and even South Boston and the Back Bay and downtown, and I just ran around with a camera and my notes and tried to take photos of everything I could. And it was a 4-day trip in late July of 2011. And when I got back, I started piecing it together. And it took about a year, having all the research put together, to, put it together. And I realized at this point that it needed to be 3 parts. The original map concept, the original poster concept, had been taken over by the map. And so I focused on the 250 most important locations from the novel. As you mentioned, these are identified in a very extensive key that takes up about the bottom third of the poster. That's the infinite map. Well, the Boston trip had given me all these photos that I could do something with, and so I decided that I would write this kind of travelogue blog that I published from July to October of 2012, which was, really a vehicle to promote sales of the poster. The poster came out in the middle of that run, and that's still up at infiniteboston.com. That thing was really helpful. Helped me actually. I was still working on the map when I was publishing that. So Lauren Leja is a friend in Boston who I met in the comments of Infinite Boston, and she helped me to nail down some places that I was wrong about. And I met Bill Lattanzi through this project as well. And then the last thing that I don't remember whether it was the last thing I came up with, but having way more locations than I could actually put onto the map. Well, this was a good thing to take and put into a Google Maps API, and that's Infinite Atlas. So it's a searchable online atlas so every one of those 600 locations is in the database. You have to click around inside some of the pop-ups to find some of these locations that don't have places. And then, had the ancillary products, as I mentioned, because we produced a lot of artwork and a lot of logos that didn't necessarily have a place in any one of these sites. And all of them together are the Infinite Atlas project. And that's how I'm talking to you fine gentlemen this evening.
If you go to infiniteatlas.com, you're immediately confronted with a map of Boston, right?
Yes.
And then you scroll out, and there are 100 points within Boston that you have. Yeah. And as you scroll out, you can just use finger scroll. There's still so many points in the northeastern United States, up into Montreal, into Quebec, and you keep going out, and there's tons in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. There's a ton of stuff mapped on what you have here.
One thing I realized while I was working on this project was that among the many resources that Wallace consulted in putting this together, he definitely had an atlas, sitting there so we could go through.
And loaded.
Yeah, and it's an older atlas too. I think I don't know which actual atlas he used, but my bet would be that it was an older British atlas, because the spellings of some of these places, especially in the Middle East, are different spellings than the ones that are in common usage, at least in the United States, circa 2018 or circa 1995 or 1990 when he was writing it.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at your entry for British Columbia here, which is where I'm from. The pin on it is sort of in central west, and you have the note about Molly Notkins and Joelle's really, really good apple juice, the muddy apple juice.
Right.
If you wanted to revise that pin and drop it down to a city called Kelowna, that would be the most accurate you could get for that kind of juice, which is the city that I'm originally from.
Oh, see, this would be a good...
It's good. Like the orchard region of the province.
Yeah, for some of these where,
If not, that's fine too.
It's fine. Yeah, I mean, Manitoba gets the name check, right? And or Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
And it was just well, where do you put that? It just got mentioned.
Sure.
So the mapping software has its own default for what the center of the province or the state is, and that's why most of these are where they are.
Except for the ones
that are down to the exact physical location of where
like
Granada House was, for example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's funny. Yeah, you would not know that fact unless you were from Kelowna.
A thing I didn't quite make clear was that it was Matt who told me where the Granada House was originally. That was the thread. I don't think I quite made that clear. And he showed it to me on Google Maps, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's that's it." And I knew I had to go visit there, and that was really the starting point for all the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think the timing of this is it was right around. I had just talked to DT Max about some of the because he had done a similar trip as you did of going to Boston and like going to see some of these places, and I wanted to hone in on that for both Bills, Beutler and Lattanzi, and let's hear from Lattanzi a little bit here too, because to me this is a very key part of what people are really interested in about the book is where is Infield Tennis Academy and where is Innit House, and how do they connect. And so Bill Lattanzi, if you wouldn't mind jumping in here and just telling us what you thought or expected, and then like the real deal about those two places.
Sure. Well, when I was first looking, I couldn't find Granada House. I don't know why. The description's fairly clear in the book, and it was Bill Beutler that tipped me off. So it goes from Matt to Bill, and once I found it, I was kind of amazed that at that time, unlike now, you could just go into the parking lot there. It's called the Brighton Marine Health Center, just like the Ennet Marine Health Center. He just changed it from Brighton to Ennet. And apparently, I guess somebody said somewhere that he liked the idea that it said Marine when it was nowhere near the ocean. But of course, it refers to the division of the military. It was a kind of a VA hospital originally. But going there, you can sit. At that time, you could just go sit in the parking lot. You might be able to still if you drive a car in there. But they have a very active security detail that comes out and confronts you if you just wander in now. But at the time, you could sit there and read the section of the book and look up and see exactly what Wallace was writing about. I mean, really pretty much exactly. You could see the rail where he says the methadone addicts hung out and waited for for the doors to open. You could see the little patch of grass it didn't have the sign on it, but you could imagine one that said grass grows by inches but dies by defeat.
Love it.
And the bay windows.
The bay windows, out front.
Well, it is. I mean, he describes it as a dead planet with 7 moons orbiting around it, and that's the way it is. This is one big giant building. I don't know if it was partly boarded up when he was there. I don't think it was. I think he may have imagined that, although it was on hard times at the time. And then these ancillary buildings, 2 big ones, and then there's a road just like he describes that was unpaved at the time. It was broken up, I guess, the pavement, and then a set of in parallel little brick buildings, all of which are various forms of rehab and kind of halfway houses or treatment centers. And the last one on the left is number 6, which is where Granada House was, and which he changed to Ennet House. It's got whitewashed brick in the book. It doesn't have whitewashed brick in the novel. It's just regular brick. I talked to Deb Larson, who ran Granada House then and runs it now, and she said that it had never been whitewashed brick. So he changed that detail. Number 7 is not crushed. It is there. The building that they sneak into, it's still there. And what interests me a lot was the way that he transformed the reality into this slightly altered world of Infinite Jest. And when I was out at that first Wallace conference, I went out to his where he grew up and where he learned to play tennis there at that park in Urbana. And you look around, and there are some whitewashed brick buildings there. So I always imagined that he liked the whitewashed brick, and that's why I did it. But anyway, but on to ETA, the Infield Tennis Academy. So yeah, he talks about it kind of looming over Ennet House at the flattened top of a hill. So if you go up as high as you can go in that area, where you come to is what is now a closed monastery. At the time, it was open when I was first looking around there around 2008 or 9, and it's called St. Gabriel's Monastery, and anybody's welcome to walk in, and you can walk out to the back parking lot and see just barely across the river in Boston the spires of Harvard, where he had been a year before his breakdown and eventual commitment to the Annette Halfway House, or the Granada Halfway House. So, I mean, a lot of what I do is wander around, think about Wallace wandering around those places. And Granada House is tremendously small and crowded, and probably sweaty, and a lot of people smoking, and it's kind of gross. And I think that I imagine that Wallace walked a lot. I imagine he walked and smoked cigarettes and thought, and so I imagine he wandered up there the same way I wandered up there and discovered this place and thought it might be a fine setting for ETA.
Beutler, anything you want to add to that about Innit House or ETA?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's another. Speaking of things that astonished me, not just that oh, there it is, but the level of detail that he wrote about this particular block, this particular neighborhood, where someone who, decided to look up, St. Elizabeth's is on the backside of that hill. The Franciscan Children's Hospital is directly across the street. And, Fidelis Way Park with the monastery, of course, it's not cardioid, it's not shaved off, and there's no tennis academy for sure. But, there are some basketball courts up there that, kind of look like they're superficially similar to tennis courts. And the most significant location on this hill that it is not mentioned in Infinite Jest, is actually Brighton High School. So there is a school for children of about the age that many of the ETA kids would be. That's there. So I think if you kind of take the monastery hill and the high school and the park and you mix them together, you have sort of you have all the elements of ETA. You have many of the elements of ETA.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think too. I mean, he's riffing both off his education, certainly, the academic part of it. But we also know that he went from, thanks to DT Max, we know that he spent part of a summer at John Newcomb's Tennis Academy in Texas, which I encourage you to go to the website there of the Newcomb Tennis Academy. They've got a bunch of videos, and to this day, in 2018, they play like they could be ETA videos. You've got John Newcomb addressing the kids and saying, tennis is not about the ball. It's not about your strokes. It's about yourself. It's a battle with yourself.
Wow.
Yeah. So
there's a guru in the bathroom levitating and dispensing advice to the children.
I don't know. Yeah, I do know he was there in the summer of '76. So I wonder if they had a puppet show on July 4th for the bicentennial.
Right.
I'll have to dig up somewhere. I had an old screenshot from the first round of Google Street View on that, and maybe I could dig it up. But what struck me about it was that really the front of the building, it was really hemmed in, and it was facing like Com Ave, right? And that I didn't get it. It was so far back from the actual street and like up on a hill a little bit, like from the Com Ave point of view, it's like behind bars almost. And it kind of looked like that bay window faced out on the prison. And the entrance, as you say, is on the parking lot side where there's like that back staircase that is mentioned. So, I mean, that sort of orientation I found really surprising, actually.
One small thing. The ravine is not nearly as impressive in real life as what I imagined when I was reading the novel. The ravine is about, 7 feet, and it goes down to a brick wall.
It's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, it's quite striking. Yeah. Looking out on the unpleasant stretch of Commonwealth Avenue, he says. Yeah. But it's... And that bar, that's the fence that forces you to walk all the way around. The subway stops right there, just as he says. But you can't, so you can see Granada House right in front of you, but you have to walk all the way up the street and uphill of the driveway and around and then down that street back.
Warren.
So all of that is in the novel. I mean, yeah, it goes on and on. The place that he wrote a bunch of it, I guess, on is it Forest Road, Bill, around about a half a mile away where he lived next after.
That's right.
After Granada. A couple of doors up is this place the discalced Carmelite nuns' home, and it's such a strange word, and there it is. It appears in Jest. I'm just looking at my Kindle copy here. Leisure Time Ice Company, a discalced monastery.
Hey Bill,
yeah.
That thing about the discalced Carmelite nun actually caused me a bit of confusion whenever Greg Carlisle was writing his book, because there's a comma where it's talking about Lyle, actually the guru, and it says something like Lyle, comma, a discalced Carmelite nun, and someone else. But it's like a serial comma problem where it's like if you read it wrong, you're like, wait, did he just say that Lyle is actually a discalced Carmelite nun? And it's like, no, but the three of them, the nuns actually came and were like working there at ETA.
I see.
But I was like, this came up. I had a long discussion with Greg Carlisle about whether or not Lyle was a nun.
That's sweet.
Because of that comma. And that house that he lived in after Granada House, I think, it was a halfway house. We called that the quarter-way house, right? Like halfway is like you're halfway integrated back into society. And this is like there's still a quarter bit of you left in the, monitored by the program. And then you're 3/4 into the real world by that point.
Yeah. And from that place where up in the attic, you can see a tennis court across the street. There's one diagonally across the street. So he had that in front of him. But it's amazing. I mean, to me, he just used everything in his life in this book. I was saying to Bill Beutler the last time I think we probably communicated, I had discovered I've been obsessively going through this stuff as obsessives do. And there's a place that he lists as the Universal Bleacher Company, and I happened to Google it. They're in Enfield, and it's not in Boston at all. But it was a company in Urbana, Illinois, where he grew up. So, just these things stuck in his brain. I think he liked the idea of a universal bleacher.
So, Bill Lattanzi, the stuff around Boston, though, I mean, it seems like, even though I lived in New York for several years, I never once went to Boston. I think I told you this. So I have no experience with like the shape of the city and what it looks like from certain angles. And, I know like David Herring had a paper about like different streets that Gately would drive down and how they form different angles. I mean, what was your take on the larger thing? Like once you get out of that Brighton area on, how did you see that functioning in the book?
Well, yeah, that was my initial point of connection because I once lived in Inman Square, as a lot of people, young people in Boston do, and it wasn't so much geographical or cartographic for me as personal. I was responding to this book saying, my God, he's taking all these places that we think of as nothing places, like no life happens here. I have to get out of here in order to have a life, and turning them into literature. So Alston Brighton, Inman Square, Central Square. They're kind of down and dirty places in those days. I was there a little before him, and we overlapped a little bit, but I didn't know him. But and they're very much places that you walk by and through. So, for instance, the place where Antitoise is located, I mean, I used that Dave Herring's article there and Consider David Foster Wallace. Came out in 2010, I think, in your press, Matt.
Right.
And he placed it, thankfully for me, he showed me exactly where it was through this kind of analysis of triangles that Wallace had laid out on the street. Yeah, the Sierpinski gasket and the Sitco sign and on the streets of Boston, and it made perfect sense to me. And I went to the St. Mary's place, and he had it on one side of the street where there had been an old drugstore, but I put it on the other side of the street because I knew there had been an organization called Cultural Survival that was founded by Harvard anthropology professors to try to keep tribes alive that they were studying by hooking them up with corporations. And they had this wonderful logo.
As you do.
Yeah, and selling thing. Well, maybe we can sell beetle nuts or something and use them as parts of a Timex watch, something like that. And what came out of that is 10,000 villages and all those kind of craft shops that you see. So it's actually a great thing. But I thought I know that having lived at Inman Square, if you want to go to Boston, the fastest way to do it is to walk up Prospect Street to Central Square, which means that he must have passed Cultural Survival dozens of times while he was living there in that 6 months. And I thought that in some sense, Infinite Jest is a book about cultural survival. And so he said, yeah, this is where I'm going to put it. So it's those, that's kind of the way I think about it. I mean, there's a kind of a triangle you can draw from Harvard down to Boston and back out to Granada House or Enid House, but I think it's like a rule of thumb for me. When I started this process in 2008, I was definitely of the sort of I'm gonna piece this all together. I'm gonna discover the real hidden code of Infinite Jest. And I worked at that for quite a while, and I think Bill Beutler's had the same experience. It's trying to trace Lenz's walk, for example. At a certain point, it's just not there, and it's not intended to be there. So at least that's what I think. It comes really close, but it's not. I mean, Wallace himself says in that Bookworm interview, what does he say? These are like a mountain climber putting pitons on the side of the cliff. It's just a rule of thumb that you go by, the triangle and the Sierpinski gasket and laying a code onto the streets. I don't think there's a hidden code in there.
It's not like City of Glass by Paul Auster.
Yeah.
You guys know that? You know that short story? Yeah. The man spelling out, was it Babylon or something?
I don't know it, so
yeah,
I know Auster, but.
So, Bill, you wrote an article about this for the LA Review of Books a few years back called Messing with Maps, Walking David Foster Wallace's Boston with images. So if you want to see some of this stuff, Google that.
Yeah, that came out of the Paris talk I did, and Lee Constantinou asked me to put it together in an article for LARB. I was really happy to do that. It was really a fun project.
Sweet.
And Bill Beutler, I want to ask you about, let's get back into a couple more details of the map itself, because I'm wondering whether in that blog series that you did, Infinite Boston, or in your trip to Boston, if there was anything else that really surprised you or felt like you discovered.
So I'll get to the last part last, because there was one discovery I found that I was, that genuinely surprised me. But I do want to, address to, Bill talking about how some of these things just aren't there. If you read through some of my Infinite Boston entries, I think the one about the location of Antitois Entertainment, or Entertainment, if you prefer.
I do.
As Randy Lenz's walk, and I didn't write about that, but I did write about Joel's walk to the very last party. And so if you read that, you can, I traced those steps going, off of the text and trying to figure out, and you know what, a lot of that works, but I think it does kind of break down a little bit once you get into the back bay. So it is, like I said, it's the hours and hours spent trying to figure out where these things were, hunched over Google Maps, combined with my, efforts to, I had 4 days and I was on foot a lot of time. So I was limited, but, found most of these things, I think. Two places that surprised me. One is across the street from the old Granada House, Enid House. I was surprised by some of the places that could have just been completely made up, but very much weren't. And the first one that surprised me was, my very first stop on that very first day, of course, was Granada House. So I walked around that neighborhood, and the first thing I saw that genuinely shocked me was the father and son market. Yeah. This is in the novel where Averill buys her Benson and Hedges, and where Hal goes for candy and Mario goes for tea. It's there. I walked in and I bought some bottled water there. At least as of I haven't been back to the neighborhood for a couple of years, but as of 2011, it was there.
Alive and well. Yeah.
Is it good? I'm glad to hear. Very glad. The real discovery, though, that I would say that I made that was a genuine discovery rather than just stumbling across the thing to find it's real. I'm pretty sure that I found the location of the building that Wallace had in mind when he was writing about Kenkel and Brandt's apartment. And so in the novel, it's described as being an attic apartment in Roxbury Crossing overlooking Madison Park High School's locked-in cordon playground. So I think on my fourth day was after I had pretty much hit everything in Cambridge and Allston Brighton and Back Bay as I wanted to. I kind of took a cab just all around South Boston and into Roxbury and into through JP, and so I did go make a stop in Roxbury. So as Bill Lattanzi will know better, Roxbury's a neighborhood. Roxbury Crossing is the T stop, and so the Madison Park High School is there within a few blocks of the Roxbury Crossing T stop. There is a hill right next to it, and there's a new Dudley Street in the book. Well, there isn't a new Dudley Street, but there is a Dudley Street, and so I directed the taxi down Dudley Street. And so there's not a playground at the high school, as there probably wouldn't be, but there's this 3-story building. I'm actually looking at my there's a 4-story building, or the fourth story is in fact clearly an attic where there is a fire escape, or these stairs that you can walk up from the outside to get to that attic, and it overlooks both Madison Park High School, which is just down the hill, and right next to it there is a playground. And so this location has all of the elements of Kenkel and Brandt's apartment, very, very slightly modified. And what else could this be? It was a weird feeling because I kind of felt like I was looking at a thing and knowing what it was, to my knowledge, for the first time since Wallace had, come up with the idea in the first place.
Did you, Bill Beutler, did you find, I'm going to ask a question, did you find when you saw these places, how did they match up with your imagination of what you thought they looked like having read the book?
I mean, like I'd already said with the ravine, I do recall vaguely what my original conception of, Enid House was, and it was a lot different. I'm somebody who read, this is a true story that I've never told anybody before, I'm somebody who read Stephen King's The Stand, imagining Texas redneck Stu Redman as Bo Jackson for some reason. I just don't necessarily
the baseball player,
the baseball and football player.
Yeah.
Bono Superflu. Yeah,
not BoJack Horseman though. Yeah.
Not BoJack Horseman, indeed. So I don't really place a lot of stock in my own mental images of things. I don't think that, when I'm reading, I tend to see things more in ideas and concepts rather than visual images. Mm-hmm. And so, I first read the first time so long ago, and now it's been almost 10 years since I, gave Infinite Jest the second full reread. I'd have to think about it before I give you another good example. I wanted to go in large part to put some actual visual, associations with these places, and it certainly did that for me, no question.
I was initially really disappointed when I went to see these places because I'd imagine, even though I kind of knew a lot of them anyway, I'd walked a lot of the same walks over the years, and but there's something magical about the dream world of literature that you enter into, and but at doing the tours, I find that I always feel a little silly taking people on these tours because it's like, well, here's a building, and here's another building, and here's another building. But by the end, when we read passages from it, you start to see the ghosts a little bit, or see the elephant, as the recreators say. You just hovering about 6 inches above the ground, you begin to see the novel in the real place, and that I love that.
Yeah, certainly. I found most of the locations I went to in real life seemed much nicer than they are described as being in the book, especially Alston Brighton, which I have the impression, and Bill, again, you would know better than me, was fairly run down. And is still a little bit funky these days, but like every other major American city has gentrified significantly from the early 2000 onwards. So when I went to go visit Boston for this trip, it was July. It was blazing hot. It wasn't anything like the November of Interdependence Day that that I think you're supposed to get from it. Like I think you're supposed to get gray skies. Despite the blue skies motif of the book, that's more like Arizona than it is like Boston. And so, it was. I had the sense that when I was there, even though I was in the same physical places where Boston was or where Wallace was, it wasn't the same place, right? It just that was a place and time that no longer existed. And so the best I could do would be to visit them and try to recreate the mental image of what it might like to have been when things were more run down.
I think that's exactly right. When I do the tour, I'll say, like, you've got to imagine this 2 or 3 levels of rehab down, and there are still and Austin was pretty gritty in the late 80s.
And what can you guys tell me about the smell in Alston? Because I've never been.
Yeah, you're referring to the line. What is it? She told
me where it smells, where it says. So I took her to Alston.
I don't know
it's one
that
of my favorites.
I don't know that it smelled particularly. I do remember a massive. I remember little details that are gone now, been rehabbed out of existence. The liquor store that was next to the giant recycling place where you could bring the bottles back, and the other little details, and the
What's that liquor store with the amazing sign?
Oh, Blanchard's, yeah.
Blanchard's, that's right, that's it.
Which did burn down around that time, and what did seem to be rebuilt in 48 hours, as if by ants. And it was one of those places where you could go and get. They sold all the college kids, and they didn't care if you had an ID. Blanchard's, if you're listening, I'm sure that's not true, but.
All this stuff you guys are talking about reminds me of one of our listeners who will sometimes tag us on Instagram, named Sander Cohen. He's currently going on a 6-month tour of Infinite Jest locations across America with his family.
Oh, awesome.
So the other day he tagged us in one of him in Arizona, like on some bluffs overlooking Tucson in the hills.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Like, as you guys are talking about, what's it like to actually go to these places? How do they match your expectations of them?
Yeah.
So there are people like you guys out there who are checking these places out even right now.
Well,
it's very cool.
And in fact, that's why I want to interject and speak directly to people who maybe don't have a lot of other experience in the literary world or have never come across other people who discuss the details of every location in a novel obsessively. And I would direct your attention to the walking tours of Dublin that are available for James Joyce's Bloomsday events. I would direct you to the people who have mapped out Yoknapatawpha County and all of Faulkner's works, and every little detail of American literature that has survived, people have wanted to see what it really looks like. And that's why we have, even Flannery O'Connor's childhood home, I believe, is on the National Register of Historic Places. And to me, it's just another sign that Wallace is sort of part of our, literary canon, for better or for worse. And his home, like, we've all been, at least the 3 of us, I'm not sure about Beutler, but we've been to the Wallace Conference in Illinois at Bloomington Normal, where now there is on the visitors' website for the town of Bloomington Normal, there is a David Foster Wallace tour with a map produced by the town that you can go and check out, places where Wallace lived and worked and taught and favored. So to me, it might sound like, oh, we're really obsessive fans. And to me, this is like part of a long tradition, maybe even going back to like Shakespeare and Don Quixote and,
Yeah, right.
That there are people who are interested in what does the real place look like. So it's not weird to me, but I think to other people, some people, it might be like, wow, that's really obsessive.
I mean,
like
guilty
you have
as
a
charged.
problem.
Yeah, it's not obsessive,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, the fandom thing. I mean, to me, I think there's something about the book that when people get into it, or on Wallace in general, that you want to get closer to it. You haven't got enough of it. And you feel like you don't quite understand it. I mean, it took me 3 tries, like a lot of people, to read the book. And when I finally did, I just went straight back to the beginning and read it again, and then it still wasn't enough, and I wanted to go out and see these places, and it's been gradual for me, and then when the biography came out in 2013, a whole lot of new
2012,
a whole lot of new interesting things appeared.
Well, and this is part of my larger argument, Bill, is just that, especially like with the society right now, like we're trying to get this David Foster Wallace Society to be a strong, vibrant thing. And, it's part of a tradition. Like even in academia, there are tons of single author societies, 200 or 300 of them affiliated with American Literature Association. That all have conferences and produce journals, and so to me, it's not that weird. But like to tell someone that you're a member of the David Foster Wallace Society is a little different than saying you're a member of the Louisa May Alcott Society or even Cormac McCarthy Society, of which there is one. So,
he's one of the major American authors of the last however many years, 75 years. So.
And I think most of the people listening to this podcast are probably on the obsessive side of the spectrum. If you're seeking out a podcast about an individual writer, it's like I don't need to defend it to you, but I do think it to me it's just another signpost. Like this mapping piece, I think will actually go further. And I mean, I would love to see more of the Illinois landmarks sort of get their due.
Yeah, I think we missed. It's too bad that the timing didn't work out. Wallace's childhood home was up for sale during I think it was during the first conference for $150,000, and if that had been done. Do
you mean his house in Bloomington is not his childhood home?
No, he grew up in Urbana.
You mean the one in Urbana was for sale?
The one, on Montclair Street there.
Yeah.
And I always thought it would be good to if there was a society that could have bought it and turned it into a museum or something.
Yeah, what's our budget at right now currently, Matt?
Not that much.
not 130,000.
But I will say that did happen with the John Updike Society, which started out with pretty, they died within months of each other, Wallace and Updike. And the Updike Society reorganized because they did get enough money to buy John Updike's childhood home and turn it into a museum. And the other common thing that happens is they will often buy one of those homes and turn it into a part museum and part like visiting writers retreat, like for if the university has like a visiting writer come in. This is the way it is in Texas State with Catherine Ann Porter House. So I mean, it's another thing that I wish we could have done, but I think there will be hopefully more to come in this area rather than the pretty solid walking tour of Boston that exists, and then of Bloomington Normal, which, like I say, we'll put in the show notes. We can link to. You can take yourself around Bloomington Normal. But yeah, like people ask all the time, like, what is there to see at Wallace when he moved to California? And it's like not much. Like where he taught, where his office was, where he lived, but that's it. So
it's interesting. Your friend or your who's doing the tour of America and seeing Wallace's sites. I've always thought that would make a beautiful kind of coffee table book to send a really good photographer around to these places, and Wallace's America, and because he's very concerned with the country. I mean, as a citizen, I think through all his work, and created his own America in the writing.
That's one thing that surprised me. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Bill Beutler, but this is actually a question for you. Is like seeing like the map on the wall is like, wow, it brings you back into the book because you're like, I forgot that he actually mentions, a place in Texas, or like everyone in their state is like looking for like what's near me. Like, was that mentioned?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And he did a good job of spreading out the mentions across the states. So most of the U.S. states get at least, some minor mention.
So I guess that wasn't so much a question as like, sorry for interrupting. Please go on with your comment now.
Well, speaking of the book, after this project came out and it got a great reception and a fair bit of media coverage, at one point I actually had a book proposal for maybe a coffee table book. It didn't quite get that far, but I wrote a whole proposal and I had an agent who was working on it for me, and I was told that it was put in front of Michael Peach. But Hachette eventually passed on it, or so I was told. Dang. And so I figured, like, well, I gave it the best shot I could on this, and they'd be the people who would know not to do it if it shouldn't be done. So it remains a dream, one that's been put on the shelf. But if anybody listening would like to see that proposal and think that they could put it in front of someone else to consider, it's on my hard drive. I could dust that off anytime.
Great. I'd love to see that book.
I think that's an interesting question because a lot of that comes back to the estate, right? So when we talk about, Charles Dickens or someone who doesn't have like living heirs and family, it's a lot easier for me, at least, just to treat that person as like back in the mists of time, and there's a place in London, like you can go, I think the George Inn, right, where like Shakespeare and Dickens ate here, and it's like really exciting. Whereas like with Wallace, I think it's a little bit, it's still not that far removed. At least to me, it doesn't feel like that long ago that he himself was walking the earth. And it wasn't. It was only 10 years ago,
10 years
less
ago.
than 10 years ago. And so I think that the estate is pretty protective of his legacy, and all of this kind of lives outside of their desires. I think if it was up to some people, like it would probably, there would be no walking tour of Boston. Bill, do you have a take on that?
Oh boy.
I don't want to get too far into it. I'm just saying, I think it's an interesting question of just him having this kind of legacy and being, still kind of part of the living world.
I think there are a lot of sensitivities from people who are very close to him and people who are involved with the estate that I don't always understand. I know that there's that idea that Wallace had that he didn't want to be turned into a statue, and decried this idea of becoming a pop culture figure because he wanted to communicate one-to-one through the writing. And I think that sometimes my reading of what the estate is worried about is that. And it's hard to convince them that that will not be the effect, that in fact what you're trying to do is spread the work itself and bring more and more people to the work in the very way that they desire. So right. I don't know that there's too much you can do to change their minds.
I'll give you another example. I mean, I have strong opinions about this because I think even if there was an actual statue of David Foster Wallace in downtown Bloomington or Normal, Illinois, that it's not going to do a damn thing that it's negative. And actually, like, all right, so you go to Hull, England, right? Hull, England is known for several things, one of which is including it's the home of Philip Larkin. So there's an actual statue of Philip Larkin in Hull, England. And people will go there and take their pictures with it. And it's like, oh, it exists. Does that mean, what does that do to his work? To me, nothing. Does that make him seem any more like a celebrity than he was in his lifetime? No. So to me, I have strong opinions about that. But I'll give you another example is that, like, when we do have the conference in Illinois, everyone usually wants to go down and see where he lived. Like, it's right down there. And, the movie kind of helped, bring that into focus, even though the movie was shot in Michigan, right? It's like, how does it compare to the movie? Because that's beyond just the having a picture in your mind of, like, what was it like in the Lipsky book, or what was it like when he's talking about walking his dogs? Like, well, let's go down there and look at it. And so every time that I've been down, Dave and Bill, you guys can talk about this too. It's like, not every time, but a couple times I've been down there, and it's like, you don't want to make it like you're a tourist, right? Because this is just
you feel really creepy.
It's a residential, street, right? So people, if you park your car there, and I mean, it's a rent house, I think now, and so people live there. And you get out of your car, and it's like, what am I doing down here? You look around, and people are like, what is this guy doing down there? And it's always been like a little skeevy to me, you know?
Yeah, you do the Mike Pemulus, like, look over each shoulder kind of thing before you, like, walk across the street and quickly take a photo and then get back in your car. I've only been the one time last year with you, Matt. Yeah. I didn't go in the previous 2 years.
I felt that way very much when I was, at certain locations in Boston, mostly the former Granada House. And the fact that it was no longer the Granada House made me a lot more willing to go set foot there, because I'd feel like I was intruding if people were still, living there. And as Bill mentioned earlier, I haven't been, back there in a while, so I can imagine that it's more difficult to access. At the time, I was able to walk up the driveway and through the parking lot, and I actually went twice. And the first time, I actually met this handyman who I think was actually named Bill as well, not to complicate things even more. But he was real friendly. And he was genuinely curious what I was doing, and I explained. He had no idea that there was a famous novel that was centered around this place where he worked, and so I gave him the name of it. He was like, "I'm going to go look this up," and I was like, "It's really, really long. Like, you don't have to." But he was like, "No, that's great." And well, toward the end of my trip, I realized that I wanted to get like a different angle of the building for my blog. And I went back, and the second time I was collared by a couple of women who were working in the in the Brighton Marine Center, and they were not so friendly. They made me sit down on a park bench next to the Marine Center and wait while they like talked to somebody, and they asked me no more, just would you leave please. And you know what, I had the photos I needed, and I did not want to cause any trouble. That's the most trouble that I caused in the entire trip, and I felt awkward enough about that.
Oh, I've caused more trouble than that.
Break it down for us.
Yeah, no, it's tough over at the Marine Center. I had a similar experience revisiting the house where Costello and Wallace lived that summer of '89. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of unreconstructed. That looks the same way it did then, I think. And there was just a guy coming out of his house, and I was taking pictures, and he had no idea. You know who lived in your house? There should be a plaque on this house. The city of Cambridge should put a plaque on this house, or city of Somerville. I'm sorry. Yeah.
The people in Woodrig Road, I was not even gonna engage with at all. Like, I don't think that they had any interest. But yeah, I mean, at some point, wouldn't you like to know? Like, I don't know, Ernest Hemingway lived next door to you. Like, right. I think that would be cool to know.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Well, a positive way to look at it is that it's a kind of a building of a community thing, and Wallace certainly in Jest is in favor of communities. So,
yeah.
That's a good spin on it, Bill. I like that.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I think it's true. I feel like the people I've talked to along the way, form a little community. And, when I was shooting out in front of there on Montclair Street in Urbana, a very elderly gentleman came by and turned out to have been a colleague of Wallace's father in the philosophy department. And we talked for quite a while, and he had no idea that the son was a novelist, none at all.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy.
So, it was a nice human connection to have made. That I wouldn't have made otherwise if it wasn't for Wallace. So,
yeah. I want to ask a kind of random question, and this is for Bill Beutler. And I don't know if I've ever asked you this before in the times we've talked, but. For people who don't know, Bill Beutler is a kind of also expert in Wikipedia, and
oh really?
Yeah, and do you still do any Wikipedia consulting or talks and stuff on Wikipedia?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it is one of the services my company provides, for sure.
So Wikipedia, I want to ask, what is your experience with, I don't know, the editing any of Wallace's Wikipedia pages or Infinite Jest? Did you, what was your experience? Did you get involved in the talk of them at all, or moderation of them?
Very minimally. There was, prior to the publication of The Pale King, I was one of the primary authors of that page. Like I took all the news coverage that had been put out there before its release, and then added as much as I could from it. And that's really about the most of it. I mean, as my volunteer editing of Wikipedia tends to be rather sparse these days, as I'm involved with it professionally, so it kind of all of my Wikipedia time tends to be
paid.
It's paid, right? I'm
That's
working
better.
on problems for clients rather than things of my own fun. But a couple times a year I do roll up my sleeves and do a project just for fun. Folks who live in the Washington, D.C. area will probably be familiar with the phenomenon of the jumbo slice pizza that's available in the Adams Morgan neighborhood where I live.
I have talked to you about this.
Okay.
And I remember I was one of several people who talked to you about Coronet Pizza in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I added that into the page once we talked about it.
So, yeah.
So I wrote about a year or so back, I wrote a fairly detailed, exhaustive as far as the subject is concerned, article about the jumbo slice pizza in Washington, D.C. So if you read that, that's basically all my work.
Well, let me follow up with one even nerdier question about this, which is sometime around that time where you talk about you created the Wikipedia page for the Pale King. Is that I created a Wikipedia Facebook page for the Pale King, which somehow around that time, Facebook, since you also do social media consulting, you know the history of this, but
Thank you for the ad.
Yeah, no problem. Sometime around there that Facebook brought in all of the Wikipedia content, and it just, my fan page got merged with some your page, which was the Wikipedia page of the book. And it was you couldn't even create a fan page for something that also had a Wikipedia page. What was that about?
I do remember when Facebook decided to create all these, they want you to tag everything that you can. And, Wikipedia being free content is sort of the one thing that all of the major tech companies can agree on. If you open up Spotlight on your Apple computer and you start searching, it'll bring in Wikipedia search results. And so Facebook will bring in search results as well. As a nonprofit educational foundation, Wikipedia is one of the most ubiquitous brands out there, but it's not trying to conquer the world in the same way that, Bezos and Zuckerberg and Tim Cook are. So it's weird that it's like I say, it's sort of the lingua franca of these major tech companies. And I don't know what that ever really did for Facebook. I feel like it was a thing that was sort of left. I think when it happened, the idea was that you could then edit that page more on Facebook, with Wikipedia being the basis of these pages, but nothing really ever came of it. And within the Wikipedia community, I can't recall anybody talking about it in the longest time.
So anyways, that's kind of random, but it was interesting to me because I remember talking with you about The Pale King, and that was sort of coming out around the time that we first started talking about this stuff, and around the time you started your company, which I have to say, I feel like I know you before you did this, and I was I remember talking to you about you starting your own company, and I was very. There was a moment where I was fingers crossed that it all works out, but I mean in a good way. I was really wanted it to succeed, but it seemed like a really bold move for someone who I knew who was our age, who when it just started his own company, and you left a pretty comfortable life to go and do that. And I felt I just want to tell you, I'm kind of proud of you for doing it. It's worked out.
Oh,
and
thanks.
I really admire your company and what you've done with it. It's really awesome.
Oh, I very much appreciate it. I should say that this project, the Infinite Atlas project, really marked a turning point in my business career. So as you note, or I'll fill in a little bit, I'd worked as a journalist and then in social media marketing in DC, and having got into Wikipedia and realizing that there was this challenge where articles about companies weren't always very good, and yet Wikipedia has this conflict of interest guideline that says, don't edit this page if it's your own company. I set off on my own in 2010 as basically a one-man consultant for the first few months, and added Ollie Ruff's wife as my first full-time hire. And up until the point where I was working on Infinite Atlas project, it was really just me and her working on Wikipedia pages for clients. And then this project put me in touch with several people who eventually would come join my team and go from being this relatively low profile consultancy to become Beutler Inc., the content marketing, social media, digital marketing agency that it is today. And the skills that I developed through trying to organize this whole project, again, certain contacts that I made were crucial. And without the Infinite Atlas project, Beutler Inc. would not exist as it does today.
That's
cool.
That's incredible. And the map itself is, like I say, it's a beautiful object. And for anyone who's a fan and wants to have it is still available on your website. Is that correct? We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but
definitely
it's infiniteatlas.com, right?
Yep, there's a link at the top to the Infinite shop.
Okay, it's in the shop there, right? And browse around the Google Map. Implementation is beautiful there as well.
Yeah, it's super cool. And Bill, how many prints did you make specifically of the map? What's the number?
So I'm in the long-term project. So I've sold right now. As of right now, I've sold approaching 700 posters. Each one is numbered as a unique edition, and the maximum number that I will sell is 1,079 for reasons that should be apparent to any
Yes,
listener of this.
They should.
Yeah. And so it's been 5 years since it was released. We're well over the halfway mark, and we still sell a few a month. And sometimes we get bursts of sales, and I go searching Google to see where we got mentioned. And we'll run the occasional Facebook ad against it, especially around the holidays, and it makes a great gift. Let me add, it is currently we talked about this before. It's currently $35 in the store. However, for a limited time after the release of this podcast, I will knock let's say 20% off of the sale price for anybody who uses the word concavity when they go to buy it. And if they use the word convexity, I will add 20% to the sale price.
You damn nut.
In addition to the exchange rate and unfavorable shipping fees to Canada. So just another way that Canada gets screwed by the U.S. Thank you guys.
But Dave, you're not in Canada anymore. We were supposed to talk about this at the top of the show.
I'm currently in Canada.
Tell us where
shipping and handling to New Zealand is insane. You do pay shipping and handling, folks.
Yeah.
Tell us where you're sitting right now, Dave. Tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Currently, my family and I are in Dunedin, which is in the South Island of New Zealand. It's about 5 hours south of Christchurch. Been here for about 2 weeks because Rachel, who is a guest on episode 19, is starting a PhD here at the University of Otago in Peace and Conflict Studies. That was also what her master's was in. So me and her and Flannery packed up, and we've been down here. It's summer, so I'm currently sweating in our little campus apartment. And it's 22 degrees outside, and it's gorgeous. And I just come from January in Canada, so it's a welcome change to be in, shorts and flip-flops again. But yeah, that's where I am.
How close are you to the water?
It's probably about a 15-20 minute walk down to the ocean, which I've been very close to that, but haven't quite taken the extra 5 minutes from the brewery yet. So maybe in the next week or so I can venture down. There's a really good brewery down there called Emerson's. It's this beautiful brick building, really good beer, very cool showroom. Going there tonight to play Netrunner with some guys. Been there a few times before this, so shout out to Emerson's. Good job. Yeah, it's great. New Zealand seems like a beautiful country. Pretty much everyone here is like kind of like Murray from Flight of the Conchords, if you're familiar with that show. I wish, not quite, but that would be a lovely country to visit.
Well, we might have to temporarily change the name of the show since we don't have one in Canada, one in the U.S. host anymore.
That's true. I was just looking on Infinite Atlas, and there's no entry for New Zealand on the map, so we might have to, I don't know.
We'll have to modify
creatively modify something.
Go on a 3-year hiatus.
There is Fiji, though. Fiji is on the map, as is Brisbane, and I was in Brisbane on the way here, so...
Maybe if there's some Infinite Jest fan fiction that mentions New Zealand, then we can add another layer.
Yeah, it's a J.R. Tolkien mashup with Wallace.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, Bill Lattanzi, I want to ask you if there's anything we skipped over, and any final thoughts you have about Boston or the map or Wallace in general.
Let's see. I just 2 things, I guess. One is I'm always amazed that Wallace. I'm amazed at Bill Beutler, first of all, that he didn't know Boston. I learned more tonight about how he did it. But God, he was here for 4 days, and I looked at his trip to Boston. He got everywhere in 4 days with no Uber and no. I don't even know if he had GPS then. So it's just amazing. And Wallace himself only lived here for 3 years, and he seemed to know it like the back of his hand. And the other thing I want to say is that if you love Wallace and you want to pay tribute to him somehow, Granada House still exists and still does great work. And Deb Larson, who is the character Pat Montesian is based on, still runs Granada House. They have a wonderful website, granadahouse.org. They take donations. Wallace's own ex-resident story is on there. So
right, yeah.
That's a way to pay tribute to everything Wallace has given us.
Oh, that's a great idea, Bill.
And we'll link to Granada House on our website.
Sure, yeah.
Great.
And one other thing I would say about that is there's a special edition. I don't know if you guys have seen this. That's a tiny little book that is it's an excerpt from The Pale King. It's essentially the Chris Vogel story published by Madras Press. Mm-hmm. And it's available for any price. I think you can just name a fair price and he'll send it to you. $5, $10, $20, and all the proceeds of that benefit Granada House as well.
Oh, great! I didn't know that. That's cool.
So if you want it, or you just want to make a donation to Granada House and get a little Wallace special edition book, go to madraspress.com. So that's another cool way.
Nice.
Beutler, any final thoughts from you about the map or the process, or anything you want people to know out there about your Wallace obsession?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think Bill's comment on, paying respects and actually, paying it forward back to Granada House was excellent. I think, I'm just, there's this project when I began it, I had no idea what would really become of it. I certainly had, high hopes for it. I've always been fairly ambitious. I guess if I had this one small footnote to add to it, and this is regrettably about me again, but one reason why. So, what can
That's
I say?
okay, man. That's why I'm here.
One small thing about this that actually it brought me that means something as well, that a connection that it brought me, a small one, through this project. My only interaction with the late Aaron Swartz occurred through the Infinite Boston website, when I think he wrote in to point out that the Aubon Pan in Harvard Square was still operational, which I had mistakenly. I didn't find it when I was there in Harvard Square for the 30 minutes I was, and so he wrote into the site to say, hey, no, it's still there. And so I quickly changed it and gave him a shout out, thanks, at the bottom of the post. And for anybody who does not know who Aaron Swartz is, he was another brilliant suicide who you should go Google this guy. His Wikipedia page tells you everything. He kind of played a role in so many things, from the development of Creative Commons, where he worked with Larry Lessig, to the creation of Reddit. He also was a early Wikipedia contributor and the creator of many articles early in Wikipedia's lifetime. And, to the Wallace community, he bestowed what I think is one of the most important essays about the book, where he puts forth in less than 1,000 words an extremely persuasive argument about what happens in the year between the the AFR descending on ETA and Hal's interview in the year of Glad. And so I'd be curious if you guys what you think of that. But I've always thought that was brilliant, and he was brilliant, and it's very very sad that he's gone. And so I cherish.
I didn't know
the fact
that.
I'm super familiar with this, and he posted it in 2009. I've sent a bunch of people to that explanation, because anyone who really wants to get into the weeds of like what happened at the end of Infinite Jest, that to me, Aaron Swartz's theory or mini essay is in the running as like one of the canonical answers to that question.
I agree. It's really good. It's really good.
There's another one. This is another footnote to a footnote to a footnote, but there's another one. I don't know if any of you guys remember that was posted on Wallace L by a guy named Jason Preston, who's now Jason Costin, and I'll give him a shout out to say he wrote a thing comparing the graveyard scene in Infinite Jest to the graveyard scene in the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The triangle scene in that, and the ghost and the wraith, and the whole theory. I was like, this might be like the best like undergraduate type reading of Infinite Jest that I've seen. I'll have to dig that one up, but we'll definitely link to Aaron Swartz's post. And I want to say that he had even posted on Wallace listserv, and super, super sad whenever he passed away as well. So
it's only 26. Wow,
did so much in such a short time.
Awful case. Thank you both for being on the show. I think we know where to find you. You're both on Twitter and all the social medias. Obviously, Beutler, you're social media guru, so you were all over. Bill, I want to give you another shout out, Bill Lattanzi, for a thing you wrote about Derek Walcott.
Oh yeah,
I really loved that piece. I think it was on WBUR, and I haven't got to talk to you about it, but I would love to go more down, getting to talk about Derek Walcott with you too. So you mentioned at the top of the show you were a playwright, or you did some work in the theater, and that's obviously a big part of Derek Walcott too. So hopefully we can talk about that more at some point.
Yeah, another podcast. This was great, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Are you going to be in Illinois this year, Bill? You're going to be in Illinois?
I am. I'm going to come. I'm not going to talk for the first time. I'm just going to come as a spectator. So
I think a bunch of us are doing that. I think we're just going to go and hang out. Yeah.
Great.
You bastards. I'm so jealous.
Bill Beutler, if you ever want to go and really go further, maybe we can send some of your maps on consignment to the Wallace conference.
Oh, that's a good idea.
In Illinois or something.
I would be happy to. And you mentioned earlier, I've actually not been to one of these Wallace conferences, and I would really like to get out there, and I just haven't found the time for it. So one of these days, absolutely. And if somebody would like a poster, I can make that happen. They're taking up a corner of my apartment that my girlfriend would like to reclaim.
See vacated.
Yes,
that's awesome.
Very cool. All right, thank you both for being on. I've really enjoyed it too, Bill. Both the Bills, I've really enjoyed it. So
it's been fantastic, guys. Thanks for your time. Any future or current Wallace or otherwise products on the horizon that we should be looking for from you guys coming down the pike here?
Yeah, I'm a little hesitant to talk about it, but I'm working on a book project, and if it gets finished, you'll hear about it.
Okay.
My future Wallace project is finishing The Pale King. I regret to confess that I have not finished it at this point. So there's that. If I can plug one other thing, if you're interested in hearing me be obsessive about something on other podcasts, I have one current podcast that I do called Enter the Void, which you can find on Apple Podcasts or at enterthevoid.fm is our website, where myself and a former colleague, we do we go in depth on one feature film at a time, and our film selection is based around what we call mindfuck movies. So if you go see the list, you'll see why they all fit together, even though they come from all different genres. And the previous show that we did was far more obsessive still. It was called Kubrick Cast, and on this show, we would go film by film throughout his entire career. We even did an episode on his short films. We did an episode on, we did 5 episodes on 2001. We did multiple episodes on The Shining and a whole episode on the making of the Shining documentary. So if you like obsessiveness, Stanley Kubrick is another artist with whom I am still obsessed with. And so I feel like that was a spiritual successor to the Infinite Atlas Project, even though it wasn't specifically Wallace.
Right. You guys have 69 episodes on Enter the Void, which is, over double what we have on Concavity here. So just pumping them out. That's awesome. I see that you guys have quite a few on Twin Peaks, The Return, which I'd love to talk to you about sometime. But, I know there's full podcasts dedicated to discussions of Twin Peaks.
So many.
Yeah. It's pretty sweet. That's your guys' header right now on your Twitter page, is the Black
David
Wash.
Lynch is kind of the anchor of that series, even though we're doing and the podcast is named for the film Enter the Void by Gaspar Noé. So if you're familiar with that film and you're like, whoa, that movie was crazy, well, that's the kind of movie that we talk about on this show.
Awesome.
Thanks guys.
That's great, guys. Matt, where can the people find us online?
We're at Concavity Show on Twitter and Instagram. I guess we have a Facebook page. We don't use it that much, but if you're so inclined. We also love getting email. I think we're concavityshow@gmail.com. And we sure are. We get a fair number of people who write in, and that's always fun. And in fact, in my inbox right now is probably 2 or 3 people to whom I need to reply that have really interesting projects going on around Wallace. So there's all kinds of stuff out there happening, and we like to hear about it, probably best in a long form text rather than 140 characters. I guess now 280, but either way, feel free to reach out on all those channels, and I guess that's it, Dave.
That's right, yeah, and as usually, we want to thank Robin O'Neill and Parquet Courts for their art associated with our show, for letting us use it. Very generous, as always. This has been episode 36. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks again, Bill. And Bill, this has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Cool.
Oh, shit, I didn't hit record. Let's start over.
No.
Can we do another take? No, I'm kidding.
I defy you, Stars.
I'm kidding.
No. I'm just getting warmed up.
Turn on the white noise murmur of the AM band and the last classic rock band's last solid record.
Yeah, in some of those episodes, we actually have like a mindfuck manifesto where we try to outline what it is that makes a mindfuck movie, because they do come from all these genres. Like this season, we did Eternal Sunshine, which is it's a mindfuck rom-com, and